I mean, cinema is kind of populated with the sort of supernatural when it comes to antagonists these days. You know, it's usually kind of aliens or ghosts or big purple men with lots of jewellery on, that kind of thing. It was so refreshing to just see a real villain, just a lion. Was that part of the appeal in telling this story?
I think so. That's my thing is not this, fantastical creatures and stuff like that. You know, not to say I might one day do something like that, but it just felt to me like creating the most dangerous and as real as possible of a lion that is a real threat. I would give and with real gravity would give me that kind of that feeling that those creatures, fantastical creatures don't do. You know, because I always feel them, some being a fantasy rather than a real scare. And that's just what, so you're right, it drew me to the project.
Of course, sort of throwback to kind of the great films, like sort of Jurassic Park and like Jaws and stuff. I just wondered, is Spielberg a kind of conscious influence on you when in films like this? Or is he so sort of like interwoven into the fabric of storytelling like this that he's kind of just an influence without even sort of realising he is, if that makes sense?
I think, no. I as much as I think he's done great, especially when it comes to these kind of things, I don't look at him as an influence in that sense, because that would be a wrong path to follow. I think what I would be much more looking to is like because I come from a more indie background, and I look at Come and See. I don't know if you know this Russian movie, and the visceral feeling of being with someone who can't hear and has lost all his family, is going through the mud. So I would rather look to something like that when I'm creating it, to bring that into. But of course the story frame is much more closer to Spielbergian than that. So maybe it's like taking a song that is a known song and twisting it with a little different treatment.
I'm interested, like tonally, I thought it's fascinating that you created a film where the villain or the antagonist is a lion, but we don't hate the lion. No. We're actually he's a victim in all of this as well. How was that kind of like balancing that, kind of creating the villain of the piece be someone that has our sympathy at the same time?
Well, I like those films. That's just like if you watch Wall Street, the villain is the most entertaining character of the movie. Michael Douglas played. So I think just in the cinema today is like everything is so black and white that they like, this is a horrible person that like it's nothing. But for me, like, villain has to be like appealing and charming. And usually I don't want the villain necessarily to die. And also because it's an animal, and animals work from instinct. They don't go from devious plans or something like that. They are So it would be hard for me to villainize an animal, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be taken down in the end, or it just means that I'm more interested in watching it if it has more layers.
I had a cat that had devious plans before. Actually, they do exist.
Yeah. Well, cats are interesting. They are easy to read, difficult to read. So I think whether they're devious or not on the long run, but they do tend to surprise you.
So I thought this film was almost quite nostalgic. It sort of took me back to my youth, because we don't see too many films like this anymore. And there's been a clip that sort of resurfaced this week of Matt Damon saying that, DVDs used to be kind of half the revenue of a movie. But now, without that kind of second sort of wind, everything's on the theatrical release. So I'm just wondering about, is it nerve-wracking bringing original films like this out into the world? And do you fear for the future of films of this nature? And are you really keen to make sure the candle's still burning?
I do think it's nerve-wracking in any case to take out a movie, because you have no control. It's a little bit like being in a car accident but being in the passenger seat, because anything you do will just make it worse, right? So you just have to go along with it and take what comes. But yes, I do fear. I as much as I like streamers because they give opportunity for adult content and things. I do think cinema is getting extremely narrow, what's released, and very popcorny. And not to say this isn't popcorny, but I'm just saying, like, it's all Marvel, And as good as that for those fans, and they should be entertained. But I think there is a lot of big audience out there who hopefully, would like to come to the cinema and see something else.
Just very fun. I just wondered if you had the chance to go on a safari when you were out on location. And have you ever shared a kind of... There's that scene, isn't there, where Sharlto sort of hugs the lion. Have you ever, not done anything like that, but have you ever shared a kind of a incredible moment with a wild animal seeing something with your own eyes?
Yes, many times actually. And I went on a safari every time I could. You know, of course there's a lot of work, but I did go on safaris there. When I was in Fiji doing another film, I swam with 60 sharks, you know, bull sharks, and poking them in the nose and stuff like that. So I went into a cage with a lion, you know, which didn't like me at all, and I had to kind of back out of it very quickly because I said, when they don't like you, we can't control them, you know. And also I was attacked by an elephant outside where I lived because I was in a reserve, you know, what do you call it, resort, you know, with wild animals. And I had to stand him down, you know. Running is not an option. I had to, you know, just face him, and in the end he backed off. You know, I did like we do with horses, like, you know, and that was just, you know. So I've been in a couple of these situations, and I love them. Actually, it's frightening in the moment, but at the same time, it is great to understand animals. You know, they are not as unpredictable as we think often, like the sharks. If you know what you're doing. And that's why shark movies are not the most realistic always, because they don't necessarily come after you like that.
Amazing. So maybe your next film should be an autobiography.
Sorry?
Your next film should be an autobiography.
Yeah, maybe it will be. Who knows? They all are in some way, you know. They all are.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey!